The important issue of hospital beds. And when I did the background to the topic on the weekend, I realized that the facts were supporting what I thought I remembered of the facts, my recall. Because the issue of hospital bed shortage has been a chronic one in Jamaica. There was a hospital bed shortage in the 1980s, the newspapers will tell you. There was a hospital bed shortage in the 1990s, the newspapers will tell you. There was a hospital bed shortage in the 2000s. Between the year 2000 and the year 2010, there was a hospital bed shortage right throughout that decade. And from 2011 forward, there's been a hospital bed shortage. So why is it that regardless of the administration in power, you can bet your last dollar and collect a nice dividend on it, that there will be a shortage of hospital beds? Context. The Ministry of Health and Wellness said in June last year that with some hospital beds that had come on stream, the country's stock of hospital beds had moved to 4,150. I looked at that figure and I said, something is not right, because there was a report prepared by the Pan American Health Organization looking at the health sector in Jamaica, published in the year 2000, but used the data from 1998 and 1999. And that report found that there were about 4,500 to 5,000 hospital beds in Jamaica at that time, using data from the late 1990s. Now, it may be that that PAHO report and the data it relied on was wrong, because you can't imagine that Dr. Tufton and company would be counting hospital beds incorrectly in the year 2025. And so, but if you look at the two sets of numbers, why would we be going from 4,500 to 5,000 beds in the public health system in the year 2000 to just 4,150 in 2025? 25 years later, we would have shed almost 1,000 hospital beds. So perhaps it is that the PAHO number was wrong. But even so, looking at the 4,150 hospital beds that the Health and Wellness Minister said was in the public health system in 2025, the same ministry said that in the 5 years up to June 2025, 384 new hospital beds were added to the stock. So if you ask the administration up to June 2025, what have you done to increase the hospital bed count? They'll say, well, we added 384. We know that about 40 medical surgical beds are coming when the UHWI facility that is in construction will be complete. But that is not even a drop in the bucket, because if you drop that in the bucket, you won't be able to find it with the most powerful magnifying glass. Further context. Across the world, hospital bed shortage is a problem. Apart from Monaco, which is a tiny principality is a place ruled by a prince. Monaco has a bed count to population, 22 beds for each 1,000 person. But Monaco does not really count because it is so tiny. So you have to go to North Korea and South Korea for a reasonable bed count to population ratio, where they're about 13 for both those countries. In the Caribbean, the number of beds available per 1,000 people in the population, when that table is taken into account, Jamaica is at almost the bottom of the list, no surprise. Apart from Trinidad and Tobago, which has 1.6 beds for each 1,000 persons in the for 1,000 persons in the population, and the Dominican Republic, which is about 1.5. Those are the only two countries Jamaica is above looking at a WHO report published in 2021. Jamaica has 1.7 beds in hospitals for each 1,000 of the population. The UK has about 4, the US 4 point something. In the Caribbean, Haiti's bed per population is higher than Jamaica's at about 4 for each 1,000 persons. Barbados is 5.7. The Bahamas is over 4. So they are well ahead of St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. All of those islands are Guyana comfortably ahead of Jamaica. You ask about money. So it must be a funding issue, you may say, because it's always about money. In 2024, the Health and Wellness Minister pointed out that in the 8 years to 2024, the government had increased the allocation to health through the annual budget by 143%. In the 2016-17 budget, the allocation to health was 60 billion. By the 2024-2025 budget, that had moved to $145 billion. That's an increase of 143%. Enough money, significant increase. So you'd say, then how is it that the healthcare budget has been turbocharged to the extent 143% more in 8 years? So where is the evidence of the developments and the procurement of equipment and supplies necessary in the system to frank this significant increase? Well, the details tell the story all the time. That 143% increase in the health budget over those 8 years up to 2024. By 2024-25, the budget, 145 billion. Of that 145 billion, guess how much went to salaries?
Oh dear.
There you go. Of that 145 billion, 133 billion of that 145 went to salaries. Only 11.5 billion was available to spend on capital projects and the purchases of equipment and so forth. All right? So you may look at the number and say, well, how much? And you start ranting. See, all of the money taken up in salaries, recurrent expenses, blah, 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 blah. And I think I should properly say recurrent expenses, including salaries, because salary is not the only recurrent, but it's the biggest recurrent, okay? But in the time, over those 8 years, the government will have increased the number of doctors it employed, the number of nurses it employed, and crucially, the number of community health aides it employs. Because they'll tell you, and they'll be right, that you need to have the people in the system to use the resources that you're going to provide to the system. And it is the people that really drive the delivery of health, using machines, using resources, working in comfortable surroundings. So you need the people. So that can't be questioned. But it still is eyebrow raising that so much of the increase in the 8-year period up to 2024 was hoovered up by recurrent expenses led by salaries. How much does a hospital bed cost in Jamaica? In 2016, a hospital bed cost $250,000. If you plug it into the inflation calculator and you go say, okay, it cost $250,000 in 2016, how much does it cost in 2025? The calculator will tell you it costs about $398,000. So a hospital bed is not cheap. This is not something that you go to fireman down at the furniture shop as a bill a bed. And in bill a base, you fling on a sponge, wrap the sponge, bring it on to city bed here. No. A hospital bed, hydraulics, and all kind of things to full fit in an ambulance, drive. You know the thing, yeah? A hospital bed is not cheap, about $398,000 in 2025. So with all of that on the table, and with me unable to find through my research a pull-out plan to address the hospital bed shortage in the country, I asked this morning of the minister and the ministry and the chief medical officer, What is that plan? It is clear that the resources available, though looking big when you write it on paper, the financial resources, the money resources, aren't enough to take care of nearly half of what is needed in the health sector. We still need more key personnel, that's a fact. We still need to make them comfortable, that's a fact. We still need to get resources. But for something like beds, it pains my heart to hear people complain about loved ones on beds. And I've said it repeatedly on this program. The first assignment I covered as a journalist was a report that a woman was on a bed, on a chair rather, at the UHWI for 3 days with a serious ailment, and she was on a metal chair, and I went and I spoke to her. I never forget it. So it's close, it hits home. And you ask yourself, why is it that administrations over time have kept us in this position? What's the magic to increasing the bed count in hospitals? Is it to build more hospitals? That's the obvious thing to do, because if you have bigger space, you can put more beds in them. But the spaces that we have now, are we maximizing how we lay out those spaces? Yeah, and putting beds in these spaces. There was a story in the UK about a hospital in Bournemouth, where the hospital got so frustrated with what we call social patients. They call them bed blockers in the UK. People who well enough to go home but stay in the hospital bed because that's where there's 24-hour security, 3 square meals, and somebody to see to your ailments when you have your aches and pains, even the ones that you imagine you have. They gave them 7 days, the family, to take them, or else they're going to sue them. And it worked. So I'm saying for the social patient problem we have, especially at Cornwall Regional Hospital, that are taking up beds that real people who have real ailments need, we need a plan of action to change that, Mr. Minister, Madam CMO. And I say all that to say that even if you have resources in the country, in some hospitals, you'll still struggle to find a bed. The one time, thank God, there's not even any wood here for me to touch so that it don't happen again. The one time I had to be admitted to hospital was for a bad case of food poisoning in 2010. Very, very bad case. Yeah. And thankfully, I was in a position to be able to afford to get a bed at the Tony Thwaite Swing at the UHWI. Yeah. Not many people can do that. The majority of Jamaicans can't do that. But I say that to say, there are people who have resources who can afford beds at certain facilities if the beds are available, but they're no bed, no day. So what do? So I'm saying, people, as the country develops, as the economy churns along, as you hear these reports about fiscal stability and growth and everything else, and you imagine that the government is awash with cash, think about all the small things that are important things that are not being able to be treated appropriately, because in real terms, resources tight. The bed shortage issue is a problem that Jamaica must start solving now. Decade after decade, bed shortage, chronic bed shortage, people go to hospital, can't lay down. It must not happen. And we need to reorientate how we spend. We need to look at our spending priorities. And there are so many priorities, that's the truth. And it's not a case like even when Horace Daly was health minister and saying that, they were going to increase bed count at 4 hospitals, KPH, MAPEN, and CRH, and another one. It's not that the PNP administration didn't want to increase bed count. It's not that Tufton and company don't want to increase the bed count. They want to. But in the avenue and the arena of the resources they have to spend, things are not being aligned properly. And I call for that alignment on this day in sports. January 26, 2025, the day after Man United humbled Arsenal at the Emirates.